She thought losing her diary on a city bus was the worst thing that could happen, until the most dangerous man in the city found it and read every word. Naomi Blake was a single mother running from her violent past, raising a daughter who hadn't spoken in 2 years. But when a mafia boss discovered her deepest fears sketched in those worn pages, he became obsessed with protecting them. What started as a stranger's intervention turned into a deadly game of protection, obsession, and forbidden love. Because the man hunting Naomi wasn't just her abusive ex. He was working with Dante's enemies, and now everyone she loved was caught in the crossfire. By the time bullets shattered her apartment windows, Naomi had to make an impossible choice: trust the killer who saved her life or run from the only man who made her daughter smile again. Subscribe right now and tell me where you're watching from, because this story of redemption, violence. The city bus lurched forward, brakes squealing as it pulled away from the curb. Naomi Blake pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching the streetlights blur into golden streaks. Her fingers ached, her back hurt. 12 hours of scrubbing floors and wiping down counters had left her feeling hollow. She pulled out her worn leather diary from her canvas bag. The edges were soft with age, the pages wrinkled from too many nights of writing through tears. She clicked her pen and began. Tuesday. Made $140 today. Still short for rent. Lucia drew a picture of a bird today. She pointed at the sky when I picked her up from school. I think she wanted to tell me something, but the words won't come. The restraining order expires in 9 days. I'm so scared. Beside her, Lucia sat perfectly still. At 7 years old, she should have been chattering about her day, asking for snacks, humming songs. Instead, she drew quietly in her notebook with colored pencils. Her small fingers moved carefully across the page, shading in a tree with purple leaves and a girl standing beneath it. Naomi glanced at her daughter's drawing and felt her chest tighten. Lucia hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since the night Terence had thrown a lamp across the room and it shattered near her head. The doctors said she could speak. There was nothing physically wrong, but the words had locked themselves away somewhere deep inside, and no amount of love or therapy had brought them back yet. "That's beautiful, baby," Naomi whispered. Lucia looked up at her with those wide brown eyes and gave a small smile. She held up the drawing so her mother could see it better. "You want to hang that one on the fridge?" Lucia nodded. The bus jerked to a stop. Their street. Naomi shoved the diary into her bag and grabbed Lucia's hand. They shuffled down the aisle with the other tired passengers. A man in a business suit pushed past them. A woman with grocery bags knocked against Naomi's shoulder. They stepped off the bus into the cool evening air. Naomi shifted her bag higher on her shoulder and squeezed Lucia's hand. 3 blocks to their apartment. 3 blocks. Then they could lock the door and be safe for another night. Behind them, the bus doors hissed shut. Naomi didn't notice the diary slip from her bag's broken zipper and fall onto the bus seat she'd just left. Dante Moretti climbed onto the bus with Marco at his side. He'd taken the bus tonight instead of his usual car because Marco had insisted they needed to move quietly. Some rival crew had been sniffing around their territory, asking questions. Better to blend in, better to be invisible. Dante hated feeling invisible. He was 35 years old and had built an empire on fear and respect. People crossed the street when they saw him coming. They whispered his name with caution. He'd earned that. Every scar, every hard decision, every night without sleep had earned him power. But tonight, sitting on a half-empty bus with strangers, he felt like a ghost. Marco settled into the seat across from him, scrolling through his phone. "The meet's at 11. We'll make sure everything's clean before the exchange." Dante nodded but didn't answer. His mind was elsewhere. It had been elsewhere for years now, ever since the bomb, ever since Gabriella and Sophia, his wife and daughter, gone in an instant. The car had exploded before he'd even heard the click. He'd been standing 20 feet away, arguing with one of his men about territory lines. Then the world went white and red and screaming. That was 4 years ago, and every day since had felt like moving underwater. Heavy, slow, numb. He leaned back in his seat and stared out the window at the passing streets. Then something caught his eye. A worn leather book wedged between the seat cushion and the wall of the bus. He reached over and pulled it free. A diary, small, with a strap buckle hanging loose. Someone had loved this thing. The leather was soft from handling, and the pages were thick with writing. "What's that?" Marco asked. "Someone left it," Dante said. "Trash it." Dante opened the cover. The first page had a simple line written in neat, curving handwriting. If you find this, please return it to Naomi Blake. There's nothing valuable inside except my heart. He should have handed it to the driver. He should have left it on the seat. But something in those words made him pause. He flipped to a random page and started reading. I don't know how to keep doing this. Every morning I wake up and put on a smile for Lucia, but inside I'm breaking. She won't talk. She won't tell me what she's feeling, and I don't blame her. How can I ask her to speak when I couldn't protect her from the things she saw? Dante's chest tightened. He turned another page. Terence gets out soon. I feel it in my bones. He'll come looking for us. I've moved twice already, but he always finds me. How do you run from someone who knows every version of you? He kept reading, page after page. Confessions, fears, grocery lists, sketches of a little girl with braids and a cautious smile. There were budgets scrawled in the margins, legal notes about restraining orders, questions about schools and safety and hope. This wasn't just a diary. This was a woman's entire life. You good? Marco asked. Dante closed the book and slipped it into his coat pocket. Yeah. What's in there? Nothing. Marco gave him a look, but didn't push. He knew better. Naomi tore through her apartment like a wild animal. She pulled cushions off the couch. She dumped her bag onto the kitchen table. She checked under the bed in the bathroom behind Lucia's toy box. The diary was gone. No. Her voice cracked. She pressed her hands to her face and tried to breathe. Lucia stood in the doorway of her room, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were wide with worry. It's okay, baby, Naomi lied. Mommy just lost something, it's fine. But it wasn't fine. That diary had everything. Her fears about Terence, her worry about Lucia, notes from her lawyer about the restraining order. If someone found it, if someone read it, if Terence got his hands on it, she sank onto the couch and pulled Lucia into her lap. Come here, sweet girl. Lucia buried her face in her mother's neck. Naomi stroked her hair and hummed softly, the way she used to when Lucia was a baby. But inside she was screaming. She'd lost the one thing that held all her secrets, and now it was out there somewhere, in the hands of a stranger. Dante sat at his desk in his penthouse office, the diary open in front of him. It was 3 in the morning. Marco had left hours ago. The city below was quiet. He'd read the entire thing, twice. Naomi Blake was a survivor. She worked 2 cleaning jobs to keep her daughter fed and safe. She'd left her abuser, but lived in constant fear of his return. She wrote poetry in the margins. She sketched pictures of her daughter laughing, even though the girl hadn't spoken in years. And there, tucked between 2 pages, was a drawing that made Dante's breath catch. A little girl standing in a park. Behind her, swings and a slide. Above her, birds. The detail was incredible. The girl's face was turned toward the sky, her mouth open as if she were calling to the birds but couldn't make a sound. Dante stared at the drawing until his vision blurred. It reminded him of Sophia. His daughter had loved birds. She used to stand in their garden and throw breadcrumbs to the pigeons, laughing every time they fluttered close. He closed the diary carefully and pressed his palms against the cover. He should throw this away. He should forget he ever found it. But he couldn't. Something in those pages had cracked open a part of him he thought was dead. This woman, this stranger, had written words that felt like they'd been meant for him, like someone, somewhere, understood what it felt like to be broken. He picked up his phone and called Marco. It's the middle of the night, Marco grumbled. I need you to find someone, Dante said. Who? A woman named Naomi Blake. She has a daughter, 7 years old. They live somewhere in the city. There was a pause. Why? Because I said so. Marco sighed. I'll make some calls. Dante hung up and stared at the diary again. He opened it to the page with the bird drawing and traced the lines with his finger. I'll find you, he whispered. The next morning, Naomi walked to her cleaning job with Lucia's hand clasped tightly in hers. She hadn't slept. Her mind kept circling back to the diary, imagining all the ways it could ruin her. What if someone turned it into the police and they thought she was unstable? What if Child Protective Services saw her notes about struggling to pay rent? What if Terence somehow got hold of it and used it to track her down? She dropped Lucia off at school and kissed her forehead. I love you, baby. Be good. Lucia hugged her tight and then ran inside. Naomi watched her disappear through the doors before turning toward the bus stop. The day passed in a blur. She scrubbed toilets and mopped floors and wiped down kitchen counters until her hands were raw. Her boss, Mrs. Chen, barely acknowledged her. The other cleaners kept to themselves. By the time her shift ended, Naomi's whole body ached. She headed to the corner store to grab milk and bread. As she stepped out onto the sidewalk, a man bumped into her hard enough to make her stumble. "Watch it," he snapped. Naomi's heart jumped into her throat. The man was tall, with greasy hair, and a sneer that reminded her too much of Terence. She clutched her grocery bag and tried to walk past him. He grabbed her arm. "I said watch it. Let go of me." Her voice shook. "Maybe you should apologize." Let her go. The voice was deep and calm, but it carried weight. Naomi looked up and saw a man standing a few feet away. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a dark coat. His face was hard, all sharp angles and unreadable eyes, but there was something in the way he stood that made the other man immediately release her. "I wasn't doing nothing," the greasy man muttered. "Leave," the stranger said. The man shuffled away, muttering curses under his breath. Naomi's hands trembled as she adjusted her grip on the grocery bag. The stranger looked at her. "Are you okay?" She nodded quickly. "Thank you. Be careful out here." He turned and walked away before she could say anything else. Naomi stood frozen for a moment, her heart still racing. She didn't know who that man was, but something about him felt familiar. She hurried home, trying to shake the strange feeling that someone was watching her. Dante stood in the shadow of a building across the street and watched Naomi disappear around the corner. Marco stepped up beside him. "That her?" "Yeah." Marco studied the street. She looked scared. She should be. Her ex is getting out soon. "You sure about this, Dante? Getting involved in someone else's mess?" Dante didn't answer. He watched the spot where Naomi had been standing and thought about the words in her diary. He thought about the drawings. He thought about the little girl who couldn't speak, and he thought about the fact that for the first time in 4 years, he'd felt something other than emptiness. "I'm sure," he said. That night, Lucia woke up from a nightmare. Naomi held her close, rocking her gently and whispering soft reassurances. When Lucia finally fell back asleep, Naomi carried her to bed and tucked the blankets around her. She walked back to the living room and sat on the couch in the dark. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. The diary, the man at the store, the feeling of being watched. She didn't know how much longer she could keep running. She didn't know how much longer she could keep holding everything together, but she had to, for Lucia. She pulled out a notebook and started writing a new entry. Not in the diary. She'd lost that, but she needed to put her thoughts somewhere. Needed to feel like she had some control. "I feel like the walls are closing in, but I have to stay strong. For her. Always. For her." She set the pen down and closed her eyes. And somewhere across the city, a man she didn't know sat in his office, holding her lost diary like it was the most precious thing in the world. And healing will leave you breathless. Dante couldn't sleep. He sat in his study with the diary open on his lap, reading the same passages over and over. There was one entry that kept pulling him back. "Sometimes I wonder if Lucia remembers what it feels like to laugh out loud. She smiles now, but it's quiet. Everything about her is quiet. I miss her voice. I miss the way she used to sing in the bathtub and make up silly songs about her toys. Terence took that from her. He took her voice, and I don't know if I can ever get it back." Dante closed his eyes. He remembered Sophia's laugh, high and bright like bells. She'd laughed at everything, at his terrible jokes, at the way he danced with Gabriella in the kitchen, at the faces he made when he pretended to be a monster chasing her through the house. He'd never heard her laugh again after the bomb, because she was gone. He stood and walked to the window. The city sprawled below him, millions of lights in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Naomi was probably awake too, worrying about her daughter, worrying about the diary she'd lost, worrying about the man who was coming for her. Dante pulled out his phone and called Marco. "Did you find the ex?" he asked. "Terence Blake, released from state prison 2 days ago. He's supposed to check in with his parole officer weekly, but he missed his first appointment." Dante's jaw tightened. "Where is he?" "We're working on it. He's been spotted around the east side, near where Naomi used to live. He's looking for her. Put someone on Naomi's building. I want to know if he gets close." "Dante," Marco's voice was careful. "What are you doing?" "My job. Your job is running the family business, not playing hero for some woman you've never met. She has a kid, Marco, a little girl who doesn't speak because of what that bastard did to her." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Marco sighed. "I'll put someone on the building. Thank you." Dante hung up and looked down at the diary again. He opened it to a page with a sketch of a park, swings, a slide, a bench under a tree. In neat handwriting, Naomi had written, "Lucia's favorite place. She feels safe here." Dante studied the drawing. He knew that park. It was small, tucked between two residential blocks about a mile from Naomi's apartment. He'd driven past it 100 times. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Naomi woke before dawn to get ready for work. She moved quietly through the apartment, making breakfast and packing Lucia's lunch. Her daughter shuffled out of her room with messy braids and sleepy eyes. "Morning, sweet girl," Naomi whispered. Lucia climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table and picked up her colored pencils. While Naomi made oatmeal, Lucia drew. It was their routine. Every morning, Lucia drew while Naomi cooked. It was the only time the apartment felt peaceful. Naomi glanced over at the drawing taking shape on the paper. A bus, windows, people sitting inside. "You remember riding the bus yesterday?" Naomi asked. Lucia nodded. She added more detail to the drawing. A woman with long hair sitting by the window. That was Naomi. And beside her, a smaller figure with braids. That was Lucia. Then Lucia added something else. A man sitting a few rows back watching them. Naomi's stomach dropped. "Baby, who's that?" Lucia didn't look up. She just kept drawing, adding shadows to the man's coat and careful lines to his face. "Did you see someone on the bus?" Lucia nodded again. Naomi wanted to ask more, but she didn't want to push. Lucia communicated through her drawings now. Pushing her to explain would only make her retreat further into herself. Instead, Naomi kissed the top of her head. "Okay, eat your breakfast so we're not late." But the drawing stayed with her all day. A man on the bus, watching them. Had someone really been there? Or was Lucia drawing from her imagination? Either way, it made Naomi's skin crawl. After dropping Lucia at school, Naomi headed to her first cleaning job. The building was an office complex downtown, and she had to scrub conference rooms and bathrooms before the employees arrived. She was on her hands and knees wiping baseboards when her phone buzzed. A text from Elena, her only real friend. "Coffee after work? I need to vent about my ex." Naomi smiled and texted back, "Yes, I need to vent about my life." Elena sent back a string of laughing emojis. Naomi finished the job by noon and took the bus to her second assignment, a wealthy family's home in the suburbs. The house was massive, with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. The woman who owned it barely looked at Naomi when she let her in. "The usual," the woman said. "Kitchen, bathrooms, and the guest rooms. Don't touch the study." Naomi nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The woman left, heels clicking against the marble, and Naomi got to work. She moved through the house mechanically, her mind elsewhere. The diary, Terence, the man from Lucia's drawing. She was wiping down the kitchen island when she felt it again, that sensation of being watched. She turned quickly, but the house was empty. Just her and the hum of the refrigerator. She shook her head. "You're losing it, Naomi." But the feeling didn't go away. Dante stood across the street from Lucia's school, leaning against a lamppost with his hands in his pockets. He'd been there for 20 minutes, watching kids pour out of the building in chaotic waves. "This is insane," Marco muttered beside him. "You know that, right?" "I just want to see her," Dante said. "You're stalking a 7-year-old. I'm making sure she's safe." "From what?" "Her own mother." Dante didn't answer. He didn't know how to explain this to Marco. He didn't even know how to explain it to himself. All he knew was that the diary had burrowed into his chest, and he couldn't stop thinking about the woman who wrote it and the child she was trying to protect. Then he saw her, a small girl with neat braids and a purple backpack. She walked slowly, holding the hand of a teacher who led her toward the pickup area. Her face was serious, her eyes scanning the crowd. Lucia. Dante's breath caught. She looked just like the drawings, small and fragile, but there was something in the way she held herself, like she was carrying the weight of the world on tiny shoulders. Naomi appeared a moment later, hurrying toward the pickup area with her canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She scooped Lucia into her arms and held her tight, whispering something into her hair. Lucia wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. Dante watched them walk away together, hand in hand. Something in his chest twisted painfully. "Satisfied?" Marco asked. "No," Dante said quietly. That afternoon, Lucia dropped her drawing notebook on the sidewalk outside a bodega. Naomi had stopped inside to grab a gallon of milk, and Lucia had been looking at a dog tied up outside. When the dog barked, Lucia jumped and the notebook slipped from her hands. The pages fluttered open and drawings scattered across the concrete. Dante, who'd been following at a distance, moved quickly. He crouched down and gathered the pages before the wind could take them. His hands froze when he saw the drawing on top. It was him, the man on the bus. Broad shoulders, dark coat, serious face. Lucia had drawn him from memory, and the detail was startling. She'd captured the exact angle of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. "Hey." Dante looked up. Lucia stood a few feet away, staring at him. Her eyes were wide, but she wasn't afraid. She was studying him, like she was trying to figure something out. He held out the notebook. "You dropped this." Lucia stepped closer. She took the notebook carefully, her fingers brushing his. Then she did something that made Dante's heart stop. She smiled, not a big smile, just a small, shy curve of her lips. But it was real. "Lucia!" Naomi's voice rang out sharp and panicked. Dante stood quickly, but it was too late. Naomi was already there, grabbing Lucia and pulling her back. Her eyes were wild with fear. "Stay away from my daughter," she said, her voice shaking. I said stay away." She turned and hurried down the street, clutching Lucia's hand so tightly her knuckles went white. Dante watched them go, his chest tight. Marco appeared beside him. "Well, that went great." Dante didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at the spot where Lucia had smiled at him. That night, Naomi couldn't stop shaking. She'd put Lucia to bed hours ago, but she still felt the adrenaline pumping through her veins. The man from the store, the same man from Lucia's drawing, he'd been near her daughter. She paced the living room, her mind racing. Should she call the police? But what would she say? "A man picked up my daughter's notebook?" That wasn't a crime, but something about him felt wrong. The way he'd looked at Lucia, the way he'd been at the store yesterday, the way he'd been on the bus. He was following them. Naomi grabbed her phone and called Elena. "Hey girl, I think someone's following me," Naomi blurted out. Silence, then, "What, who?" "I don't know, a man. I've seen him 3 times now. He was on the bus, he was at the store, and today he was near Lucia's school." "Naomi, you need to call the cops." "And say what? I can't prove anything. And if I make a big deal and it's nothing, CPS could get involved. They could say I'm unstable. They could take Lucia. That's not how it works." "You don't know that." Naomi's voice cracked. "I'm barely holding on, Elena. I can't lose her." Elena was quiet for a long moment. Okay, listen, do you have somewhere you can go? Just for a few days?" "No." "Then stay inside. Lock your doors. Keep Lucia close. And if you see him again, call me immediately. I'll come over." "Okay." Naomi wiped her eyes. "Okay." After she hung up, she checked all the locks on the doors and windows. Then she sat on the couch in the dark, listening to every creak and groan of the old building. She didn't see the figure standing in the shadows across the street, watching her window. Dante stared up at Naomi's apartment. The lights were off, but he knew she was awake. He'd seen her shadow move past the window twice. She was scared, and it was his fault. He pulled out the diary and opened it to a random page. "I wish I could be brave for Lucia. I wish I could be the mother she deserves. But most days I'm just pretending. I'm just holding on by a thread, hoping it doesn't snap." Dante closed the book and slipped it back into his coat. He'd scared her today. He'd made things worse. But he couldn't walk away now. Not when Terence was out there, hunting. He pulled out his phone and texted Marco. "I need you to leave something at her door." A minute later, Marco responded. "What?" "A new sketchbook for the kid and a note." "What should the note say?" Dante thought for a moment, then typed, "She's safe, I promise." Marco sent back a single word, "Insane." But Dante knew he'd do it. Marco always did. Dante took one last look at Naomi's window, then turned and walked into the night. Inside her apartment, Naomi finally fell asleep on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself. She dreamed of locked doors and shadows that wouldn't stay away. And in the morning, she'd find a package outside her door that would change everything. The sun hadn't fully risen when Naomi opened her front door to take out the trash. She nearly tripped over the box sitting on her doormat. It was wrapped in brown paper tied with string, no address, no name. Her heart hammered in her chest. She looked down the hallway, but it was empty. She picked up the box carefully, as if it might explode, and brought it inside. Lucia was still asleep. Naomi set the box on the kitchen table and stared at it for a full minute before she worked up the courage to open it. Inside was a brand new sketchbook. The cover was soft leather, deep purple with gold edging, the kind of sketchbook Naomi could never afford, and tucked inside the front cover was a note written in neat, masculine handwriting. "She's safe, I promise." Naomi's hands trembled. She read the note 3 times, trying to understand who would leave this, and how did they know about Lucia's drawings. Then it hit her. The man from yesterday, the one who'd picked up Lucia's notebook. He'd seen her drawings. He knew. But why would he leave this? What did he want? Naomi shoved the sketchbook back into the box and pushed it away. Every instinct told her to throw it out, to stay away from whoever had left it. But a small part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, felt something else. Curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. She heard Lucia's bedroom door open. Her daughter padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. When she saw the box, she stopped. "It's nothing, baby," Naomi said quickly. "Just something someone left by mistake." But Lucia walked over to the table and peeked inside. Her eyes went wide when she saw the sketchbook. She looked up at Naomi, then back at the sketchbook, then at Naomi again. "No," Naomi said firmly. "We're not keeping it." Lucia's face fell. She reached out and touched the soft leather cover, her fingers tracing the gold edges. Naomi's resolve cracked. She'd give Lucia anything. She'd work herself to death to make her daughter happy. And this sketchbook, this beautiful, expensive thing, had made Lucia's eyes light up in a way Naomi hadn't seen in months. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, you can keep it, but we're not taking anything else from strangers, you understand?" Lucia nodded solemnly. She picked up the sketchbook and hugged it to her chest. Naomi watched her daughter carry it back to her room, and her stomach twisted with guilt and fear. She didn't know what she'd just agreed to. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew, deep down, that everything was about to change. Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. For 3 days she kept looking over her shoulder. Every stranger on the bus made her pulse spike. Every shadow seemed threatening, but nothing happened. No more gifts. No more sightings of the man with the dark coat. Maybe it was over. Maybe he'd moved on. But on the 4th day everything fell apart. Naomi woke up to find her bedroom window cracked open. Just an inch. But she knew she'd locked it the night before. She always locked it. On the floor beneath the window sat a single red rose. Naomi's legs went weak. She stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't the man from the bus. This was Terence. This was his signature. He'd left roses for her when they first dated. Red roses that she'd thought were romantic until she learned they were really markers. His way of saying, "I can get to you whenever I want." She grabbed Lucia from her bed and ran to Eleanor's apartment 2 blocks away. She pounded on the door until her friend answered, bleary-eyed and confused. "He's back," Naomi gasped. "He's been in my apartment." Eleanor pulled them inside immediately. She made coffee while Naomi sat on the couch, holding Lucia so tight the girl squirmed. Elena listened to everything, the open window, the rose, the fear that had been building for weeks. "You need to call the police," Elena said firmly. "And tell them what? That my ex left a flower? They'll say I'm being dramatic. Or worse, they'll do a welfare check and decide I'm unstable. Then CPS gets involved and—" "Naomi," Elena grabbed her hands. "You can't keep living like this. You can't keep running." "I don't know what else to do." Elena looked at Lucia, who sat quietly on the couch, drawing in her new sketchbook. "What about going to a shelter? Just for a little while?" "I can't take her to a shelter. She needs stability. She needs—" Naomi's voice broke. "She needs better than what I can give her." "Don't say that. You're a good mom." But Naomi couldn't hear it. All she could hear was the sound of her window sliding open in the night. All she could see was Terence's face, smiling as he climbed inside. Dante got the call from his guy, watching Naomi's building at 7 in the morning. "Someone was here last night," the man said. "Male, late 30s. He went around to the back fire escape and climbed up to her floor." Dante was out of bed before the man finished talking. "Did he get inside?" "Don't know. He was only there for a few minutes, then he left." "Where's Naomi now?" "She left early this morning. Took the kid to an apartment building on West Street. They're still there." Dante grabbed his coat. "Stay on that building. If the guy comes back, you call me immediately." "Got it, boss." Dante hung up and called Marco. "Terence was at Naomi's apartment last night." Marco groaned. "Dante, you can't keep doing this." "He broke in, Marco. He's escalating. So let her call the cops. This isn't your problem." "She won't call the cops. She's terrified they'll take her daughter away. And that's sad, but it's not your responsibility." Marco's voice softened. "I get that you want to help, but you're getting too involved. You read a diary. That doesn't mean you owe this woman your protection." Dante closed his eyes. Marco was right. He knew Marco was right, but it didn't change anything. "Find Terence," Dante said quietly. "I want to know where he's staying, who he's talking to, everything." Marco sighed. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No." "Fine. I'll make some calls." Naomi spent the morning at Elena's apartment trying to figure out her next move. She called in sick to both her jobs. She couldn't focus on scrubbing floors when her life was unraveling. Lucia sat on the floor drawing. She'd filled half the new sketchbook already with images that broke Naomi's heart. A window with a crack in it, a rose with thorns, a girl hiding under a bed. "She's processing," Eleanor said softly. "Let her get it out." Naomi nodded, but she couldn't stop the tears from sliding down her face. She'd tried so hard to protect Lucia. She'd left Terence, moved across the city, changed their routine, but it hadn't been enough. It was never enough. Around noon, Eleanor had to leave for work. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said. "I'll be back by 6. Thank you." After Elena left, Naomi locked the door and checked all the windows. Then she sat on the couch and pulled Lucia into her lap. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. Lucia pulled away first. She picked up her sketchbook and drew something new. When she finished, she held it up for Naomi to see. It was a man. The same man from before, broad shoulders, dark coat. But this time, he was standing between Lucia and a shadowy figure that looked like a monster. Naomi's chest tightened. "Who is that, baby?" Lucia pointed to the man with the dark coat. Then she pointed to herself. Then she pointed to Naomi. "You think he's protecting us?" Lucia nodded. Naomi didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to tell Lucia that strangers weren't heroes, that the world didn't work like that. But another part of her, the part that had read the note in the sketchbook, wondered if maybe Lucia saw something she didn't. Dante found Terence at a motel on the east side. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Marco's contact had tracked him there through a friend of a friend who owed them a favor. Dante sat in his car across the street, watching the second-floor window where Terence was staying. Marco sat beside him, tense and quiet. "What's the plan?" Marco asked. "I'm going to talk to him." "Talk?" "Dante, this guy's a convicted abuser. He's not going to listen to reason. Then I'll make him listen. You're going to start a war over a woman you've never even spoken to." Dante turned to look at Marco, his second in command, his closest friend, the man who'd stood beside him through every bloody decision of the last 10 years. Marco's face was lined with worry. "I'm not starting a war," Dante said quietly. "I'm finishing one." He got out of the car before Marco could argue. He crossed the street, climbed the stairs, and knocked on Terence's door. It opened a crack. A man with thin hair and bloodshot eyes peered out. "Yeah? Terence Blake? Who's asking?" Dante pushed the door open and stepped inside. Terence stumbled back, surprised. The room was a mess. Empty beer bottles, fast food bags, clothes scattered everywhere. "What the hell, man?" Dante grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "Listen very carefully. You're going to stay away from Naomi Blake and her daughter. You're not going to call them. You're not going to go near their building. You're not going to breathe in their direction, understand?" Terence's eyes went wide. Then he started laughing. "Who the hell are you? Her new boyfriend? I'm someone you don't want to mess with." "Yeah?" Terence sneered. "Well, I don't care who you are. Naomi's mine. That kid's mine. I got rights. You gave up your rights when you put your hands on them. That bitch lied about what happened." "I never—" Dante's fist connected with Terence's jaw before he could finish the sentence. The man crumpled to the floor, blood streaming from his mouth. "Stay down," Dante said coldly, "and stay away from them. Because if I hear you went near them again, I won't just hit you. I'll make sure you disappear. Permanently." He walked out without looking back. Marco was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, shaking his head. "Feel better?" Marco asked. "No," Dante said, "but it's a start." That night, Naomi returned to her apartment with Lucia. She'd waited until dark, hoping Terence wouldn't see them. She moved quickly from the bus stop to her building, keys already in her hand. They made it inside without incident. Naomi locked the door behind them and checked every window. Everything was secure. She put Lucia to bed and then collapsed on the couch, exhausted. She was reaching for her phone to text Elena when she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, heavy and slow. Then a knock on the door. Naomi's blood turned to ice. She grabbed the kitchen knife she'd started keeping on the coffee table and moved silently to the door. She looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway. But it wasn't Terence. It was him, the man from the bus, the man who'd picked up Lucia's notebook, the man who'd left the sketchbook. Naomi's heart hammered. She gripped the knife tighter. He knocked again. "Naomi Blake?" His voice was deep and steady, not threatening, just calm. "I know you're scared," he continued. "I know you don't know me, but I need to talk to you. It's about your ex." Naomi pressed her forehead against the door. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent, to wait until he left. But Lucia's drawing flashed through her mind. the man standing between them and the monster. She took a shaky breath and opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock in place. "Who are you?" He looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "My name is Dante Moretti, and I found your diary." Naomi's world tilted. "You... what?" "I found it on the bus. I read it. I shouldn't have, but I did." He paused. "And I know about Terence. I know he's back. I know he was here last night. How do you—" "I've been watching your building, making sure you're safe." Naomi's grip on the knife tightened. "That's not comforting. That's stalking." "I know how it sounds." Dante's voice was careful. "But Terence is dangerous. He's staying at a motel on the east side. He's been planning to take Lucia." Naomi's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "Because I went to see him, and I made it clear what would happen if he came near you again." The words hung in the air between them. Naomi stared at this stranger, this man who'd read her deepest fears and darkest moments, and didn't know whether to slam the door or fall to her knees in relief. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" Dante looked away. For the first time his hard expression cracked. "Because I know what it's like to lose someone, and I couldn't stand by and let it happen again." Naomi's hand shook. She wanted to close the door. She wanted to tell him to leave, but she also wanted to ask him 1,000 questions. She wanted to know what he'd read in her diary. She wanted to know if Terence was really gone. She wanted to know if she and Lucia could finally be safe. "I don't trust you," she said. "I know. You had no right to read my diary." "I know. And you can't just show up here and expect me to—" "I don't expect anything," Dante interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know that someone's watching out for you. That's all." He turned and walked away before she could respond. Naomi watched him disappear down the stairs, her mind spinning. She closed the door and locked it. Then she slid down to the floor, the knife still clutched in her hand, and let herself cry. The next morning, Dante's phone buzzed while he was in a meeting with his crew. He ignored it the first time, but when it rang again immediately, he knew something was wrong. He stepped out into the hallway and answered. "What?" It was his guy from Naomi's building. "Boss, we have a problem." "What happened?" "Terence is back. He's got friends with him this time. They're watching the building." Dante's blood went cold. "How many?" "3 that I can see. Maybe more." "Is Naomi inside?" "She left an hour ago, took the kid to school, then went to work. But they're waiting for her to come back." Dante was already moving. "Stay on them. I'm on my way." He hung up and found Marco. "We need to move now." "What's going on?" "Terence brought backup. He's making his play." Marco cursed under his breath. "I'll get the guys." 20 minutes later, Dante was parked across from Naomi's building with 4 of his men. He could see Terence and his friends loitering near the entrance, trying to look casual but failing. They were young, probably gang affiliates looking to make some extra cash by helping an ex-con track down his family. Stupid, dangerous, and about to learn a very painful lesson. "Wait here," Dante told his men. "I'll handle this." "Dante," Marco started. "Wait here." Dante crossed the street and walked straight toward Terence. The younger man saw him coming and straightened up, recognition dawning on his face. "You," Terence spat. "Me." Dante stopped a few feet away. "I thought we had an understanding." "Yeah? Well, I changed my mind. This is my family. You don't get to tell me what to do." "You're right, I don't." Dante's voice was cold. "But I'm going to tell you one more time. Walk away. Leave the city. Forget Naomi and Lucia exist. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure you regret it for the rest of your very short life." One of Terence's friends stepped forward, trying to look tough. "You don't scare us, man. We know who you are. You're just some—" Dante moved so fast the kid didn't have time to react. One punch to the gut, and he was on the ground, wheezing. The other 2 friends backed up, suddenly less confident. Terence pulled a knife. His hand shook, but his eyes were wild. "I'll kill you." "No, you won't." Dante's voice was eerily calm. "Because you're a coward. You only hurt people who can't fight back, women, children. But when someone your own size stands in front of you, you fold. I'm not scared of you. You should be." For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Terence lunged. Dante sidestepped easily. He caught Terence's wrist, twisted, and heard the satisfying crack of bone breaking. Terence screamed and dropped the knife. Dante kicked it away and then drove his fist into Terence's face. The man collapsed. Dante crouched beside him. "This is your last warning. Disappear, or I'll make sure the next time we meet is the last time you breathe." He stood and walked back to his car. His men watched silently as he got in. Marco just shook his head. "You're going to get yourself killed," Marco muttered. "Maybe." Dante looked at Naomi's building. But not today. Naomi didn't find out about the fight until later that evening. She was making dinner when there was another knock on her door. She tensed immediately, reaching for the knife again. But when she looked through the peephole, it was Dante. And this time, he looked different. His knuckles were bruised. There was blood on his shirt collar. She opened the door. What happened? Terence came back. He's in the hospital now. Broken wrist, broken nose. He won't be bothering you for a while. Naomi's legs felt weak. You did that? I did what needed to be done. She should have been horrified. She should have called the police. But all she felt was an overwhelming wave of relief. Why? She asked again. Why are you doing this? Dante met her eyes. Because I read your diary. I read about your daughter. I read about how scared you are, and I couldn't walk away. But you don't know us. I know enough. They stood there in the doorway, the silence stretching between them. Then Lucia appeared behind Naomi, peeking out from around her mother's legs. When she saw Dante, her face lit up. She ran to him. Naomi gasped, reaching out to stop her, but Lucia was too fast. She threw her small arms around Dante's legs and held on tight. Dante froze. He looked down at the little girl clinging to him, and something in his hard expression shattered. Slowly, carefully, he knelt down. He put his hand on Lucia's back, and she looked up at him with complete trust. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. Her daughter hadn't touched anyone but her in 2 years. Not Elena, not teachers, not therapists. But she was holding on to this stranger, like he was the safest person in the world. She knows, Naomi whispered. Somehow she knows you're trying to help us. Dante didn't say anything. He just stayed there, kneeling on the floor with the little girl's arms wrapped around him, and let himself feel something he thought was dead. Hope. The attack came 3 nights later. Naomi woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. For a split second, she thought she'd imagined it. Then she heard footsteps in the living room. Heavy, deliberate, multiple sets. She threw off the covers and ran to Lucia's room. Her daughter was already awake, eyes wide with terror. Naomi grabbed her and pressed a finger to her lips. Lucia nodded, understanding immediately. They had to hide. They had to get out. But before Naomi could reach the window, her bedroom door flew open. A man she didn't recognize stood there, holding a gun. Behind him, 2 more men crowded into the small apartment. "Where is he?" the first man demanded. Naomi's voice wouldn't work. She held Lucia tighter, backing toward the wall. "I said, where is he? Moretti. We know he's been here." I don't know what you're talking about," Naomi stammered. The man raised the gun, pointing it at Lucia. "Don't lie to me." Naomi felt her whole world narrow to that single point, the barrel aimed at her daughter's head. She opened her mouth to scream, to beg, to offer anything. Then the window exploded inward. Dante came through in a shower of glass, moving like violence given form. He hit the first man before anyone could react, driving him into the wall so hard the drywall cracked. The gun clattered to the floor. The other 2 men pulled weapons, but Dante was already moving. He was a blur of brutal efficiency, strikes that broke bones, movements that turned attackers' momentum against them. One man went down with a shattered knee. The other tried to run and made it 3 steps before Dante caught him by the collar and slammed his head into the doorframe. The whole thing took maybe 15 seconds. Then Dante was there, in front of Naomi and Lucia, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm from a cut on his shoulder. His knuckles were split and bleeding, but his eyes were focused and clear. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Naomi couldn't speak. She just shook her head. "We need to move, now." He grabbed her free hand. "More are coming." As if summoned by his words, gunfire erupted from outside. The windows shattered. Naomi screamed and dropped to the floor, covering Lucia with her body. Dante crouched over them both, shielding them from the flying glass. "Marco!" he shouted into his phone. "We're pinned down. 2nd floor, west side. 2 minutes." Marco's voice came back, tight with tension. 2 minutes felt like forever. Naomi pressed her face into Lucia's hair, trying to make herself as small as possible. The gunfire was constant now, a deafening roar that made her bones vibrate. She could hear men shouting outside, car doors slamming. More shots. Dante stayed over them the whole time, his body a wall between them and the chaos. A bullet tore through the wall near his head, and he didn't even flinch. Then suddenly the shooting stopped. "Clear!" someone shouted from outside. Marco's voice. Dante stood carefully, keeping low. He looked down at Naomi. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though her legs felt like water. Stay behind me. Don't look at anything. Just move. He led them through the destroyed apartment. Naomi tried not to look, but she couldn't help seeing. The men Dante had fought lay motionless on the floor. Blood pooled on the worn carpet. The walls were riddled with bullet holes. This had been her home, her safe place. And now it was a war zone. Outside, 3 black SUVs were parked in the street. Marco stood by the nearest one, his gun still drawn. When he saw them, relief flooded his face. "Get them in the car," he said. Dante ushered Naomi and Lucia into the back seat. Then he climbed in beside them. Marco got behind the wheel, and they were moving before Naomi could even process what was happening. "What?" she started. "Not now," Dante said quietly. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around Lucia, who was shaking violently. "We need to get you somewhere safe first." Naomi wanted to argue. She wanted answers. But when she looked at her daughter's face, pale and drawn, eyes glazed with shock, she just nodded. They drove in silence through the dark streets. Naomi didn't recognize the route. They left the city behind, heading into an area with large houses set back from the road behind iron gates and high walls. Finally, they turned onto a private drive. The gates opened automatically, revealing a sprawling estate. The house was massive, 3 stories of stone and glass lit by soft exterior lights. Gardens stretched out on either side, perfectly manicured even in the darkness. "Where are we?" Naomi whispered. "My home," Dante said. "No one can touch you here." The house was like something from a movie. Marble floors, high ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than Naomi made in a year. She felt completely out of place in her worn pajamas and bare feet, still holding Lucia in her arms. A woman appeared from one of the side rooms, older, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Mr. Moretti," she said, "the guest rooms are ready." "Thank you, Rosa." Dante turned to Naomi. "Rosa runs the house. Anything you need, ask her." Rosa smiled gently at Lucia. "Oh, you poor sweet thing. Come, let's get you settled." She led them upstairs to a suite of rooms that was bigger than Naomi's entire apartment. There was a large bedroom with a king-sized bed, a sitting area with a couch and TV, and a bathroom with a tub that looked like it could fit 3 people. "There are clothes in the closet," Rosa said. "I'll bring up some warm milk and cookies for the little one." After she left, Naomi just stood in the middle of the room, still holding Lucia. Her mind felt blank, overloaded. She couldn't process what had just happened. Men with guns in her apartment, Dante crashing through the window, the gunfight, the blood. Her knees gave out. She sank onto the edge of the bed, and Lucia clung to her neck. "We're okay," Naomi whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "We're okay, baby, we're safe now." But was that true? How could anywhere be safe when men with guns were hunting them? When Dante Moretti, a man she barely knew, was the only thing standing between them and death? She thought about the diary, about all the things she'd written, her fears, her struggles, her desperate prayers for protection, and somehow impossibly those prayers had been answered, just not in any way she could have imagined. There was a soft knock on the door. Dante stood in the doorway, cleaned up now. He'd changed into a fresh shirt, and someone had bandaged his shoulder, but his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. "Can I come in?" he asked. Naomi nodded. He entered slowly, like he was afraid of spooking them. When Lucia saw him, she reached out her small hand. Dante's expression softened. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. Lucia touched his face gently, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. She was checking to see if he was real, if he was hurt, making sure he was still there to protect them. "I'm okay," he said softly. "See, all good." Lucia looked at her mother, then back at Dante. Then she did something that made them both freeze. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. It was such a simple gesture, such a small thing, but it broke something inside Dante. Naomi saw it happen, saw the careful walls he'd built around himself crack and crumble. His eyes filled with tears, and he closed them tightly. "Thank you," he whispered. Lucia pulled back and settled against her mother's chest. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell asleep. Naomi looked at Dante. "Who were those men?" "They work for a rival family. Someone who wants to hurt me by going after people I care about." "But we're not people you care about, we're strangers." "You're not strangers to me." Dante's voice was rough. "I know that doesn't make sense. I know I'm a stranger to you. But after reading your diary, after seeing you fight so hard to protect your daughter, I couldn't walk away. You should have. This is insane. We're in danger because of you." "I know." The weight of guilt was clear in his voice. "And I'm sorry. I never meant to pull you into my world." But I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure Terence and everyone else knows that you're under my protection. No one will touch you again. And what does that mean? We just live here in your house forever? For now, Dante stood slowly. Just until I handle things. Then you can go wherever you want. I'll set you up in a new place. New identity if you need it. Money for a fresh start. Whatever it takes. Naomi wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that she didn't need his help, that she could handle her own life. But the words stuck in her throat. Because the truth was, she couldn't handle it. She'd been drowning for years, barely keeping her head above water, and tonight had proven that all her running, all her hiding, had been useless. "Why did you keep my diary?" she asked quietly. Dante looked at her for a long moment. "Because it made me feel something I thought I'd lost. Reading your words, seeing your daughter's drawings, it reminded me that there's still good in the world, still people worth protecting." He paused. "I lost my family 4 years ago, my wife and daughter. They died because of me, because of the life I chose." Naomi's breath caught. "I'm sorry. So am I." His voice was barely a whisper. "Every day. But when I found your diary, when I read about you fighting so hard to save your little girl, I thought maybe I could do something right. Maybe I could protect someone this time." Tears slid down Naomi's cheeks. She understood now. This wasn't about them. Not really. This was about a broken man trying to find redemption in the only way he knew how. "What was her name?" Naomi asked. "Your daughter, Sophia. How old was she?" 6. The same age Lucia had been when she stopped speaking, when her world became too scary for words. "I think she would have liked you," Naomi said softly. "Sophia, I think she would have been proud that you're helping us." Dante's jaw tightened. He nodded once, not trusting his voice. Then he turned and left before his composure could break completely. Naomi sat in the silence, holding her sleeping daughter, and let herself cry for everything they'd lost and everything they might still find. The next morning, Lucia woke up in the enormous bed and looked around in confusion. For a moment, panic flashed across her face. Then she saw her mother beside her and relaxed. Naomi smoothed her daughter's hair. "It's okay. We're safe here." They got dressed in the clothes Rosa had left, simple outfits that fit surprisingly well. Then they ventured downstairs, following the smell of breakfast. The kitchen was huge, with an island in the center and windows overlooking a garden. Rosa stood at the stove, cooking eggs and bacon. When she saw them, she smiled. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. Sit, sit. Breakfast is almost ready." They sat at the island, and Rosa placed plates in front of them, loaded with more food than Naomi usually had in her apartment for a week. Scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, toast with butter and jam, fresh fruit. Lucia's eyes went wide. She looked at her mother for permission. Naomi nodded, and Lucia dug in with enthusiasm. "Mr. Moretti is in his office," Rosa said. "He asked me to tell you that you're welcome to explore the house and grounds. There are guards, but they're here to protect you, not watch you." Naomi nodded, though the idea of guards made her stomach twist. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how people lived. But then again, nothing about her life had been normal for a long time. After breakfast, she and Lucia did explore. The house was even bigger than it seemed from the outside. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a gym, a home theater, and a conservatory filled with plants. Upstairs, there were at least 10 bedrooms, each one beautifully decorated. Outside, the gardens were stunning, flower beds in full bloom, stone pathways, a fountain in the center of it all. And at the far end, a small garden plot with freshly turned soil, as if someone had just been planting. Lucia tugged on Naomi's hand and pointed. "You want to look?" Naomi asked. Lucia nodded. They walked over together. There were gardening tools leaning against a nearby shed, and small packets of seeds sitting on a bench. Lucia picked up one of the packets. "Sunflowers. Those are beautiful," came a voice behind them. Naomi turned to find Dante standing a few feet away. He looked different in the daylight, younger somehow, less like a dangerous crime boss and more like a man who carried too much weight. "I was just starting a garden," he said. "I used to have one years ago, but after my family died, I let it go. I'm trying to bring it back." Lucia held up the sunflower seeds hopefully. "You want to plant those?" Dante asked. She nodded. "Okay, come on, I'll show you how." He led them to the garden plot and knelt in the dirt. Lucia knelt beside him, watching carefully as he demonstrated how to make small holes in the soil and drop in the seeds. She copied his movements exactly, her small hands working the earth with surprising care. Naomi stood back and watched. Her daughter, who'd been silent and scared for so long, was smiling, actually smiling as she planted flowers with a man who'd crashed into their lives like a storm. "She trusts you," Naomi said quietly. Dante looked up at her. "She shouldn't. I'm dangerous." "Maybe, but you're also kind. She can see that. Kindness doesn't erase what I've done, the people I've hurt." "No," Naomi agreed, "but maybe it's a start." They worked in the garden for over an hour. By the time they finished, both Lucia and Dante had dirt under their fingernails and smudges on their clothes. Lucia's cheeks were flushed with happiness. That night, Rosa made them dinner, a proper family meal around a table. It felt surreal. Naomi couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten at a real table instead of on the couch with leftovers. She couldn't remember the last time Lucia had looked so relaxed. After dinner, Dante walked them back to their room. "Will you be safe here?" Naomi asked. "Those men who came last night, will they come here?" "No, this place is a fortress, and after tonight, everyone will know what happens to people who threaten what's mine." He caught himself. "What I'm protecting, I mean." But Naomi heard what he'd said, what he'd implied, and something warm and terrifying bloomed in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Dante nodded. He started to leave, then paused. "Your daughter drew something today. After we planted the seeds, she left it on the kitchen table." "What was it?" 3 people, you, her, and me, standing in a garden." His voice was rough with emotion. "We were holding hands." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She understood what that meant. Lucia was drawing her wishes now, her hopes, not her fears. "She wants us to be a family," Naomi said. "I know." Dante looked away. "And I don't know if I can give her that. I don't know if I'm capable of it anymore." "Neither do I," Naomi admitted. "But maybe we could try, just for a little while, just to see." Dante met her eyes. For a long moment they just looked at each other. 2 broken people who'd found each other in the most impossible way. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll try." The days blurred together. Naomi and Lucia settled into a strange new routine. Mornings in the garden with Dante, afternoons exploring the property or reading in the library, evenings having dinner together like they were a real family. Naomi started to notice small things. The way Dante always made sure Lucia had her favorite foods. The way he spoke to her gently, never raising his voice. The way he'd pause in his work to watch them through his office window, a small smile on his face. And she started to notice how she felt when he was near, the way her heart beat faster, the way she found excuses to be in the same room, the way his rare smiles made her feel like the sun was breaking through clouds. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. Falling for a man like Dante Moretti was a recipe for heartbreak, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. One evening, about a week after they'd arrived, Dante found her sitting alone on the back patio. Lucia was inside with Rosa, having a snack before bed. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "It's your house." He sat beside her on the bench. They watched the sunset in comfortable silence. "Marco found Terence," Dante said quietly. Naomi's stomach clenched. "What?" "He's been hiding with the crew that attacked us. They're planning something bigger, an assault on one of my warehouses. They want to draw me out." "What are you going to do?" "End it." His voice was cold, final. "I'm going to make sure Terence Blake never hurts anyone again." Naomi should have felt horror. She should have told him not to. But all she felt was relief. "When?" "Tomorrow night." "Will you—" She swallowed hard. "Will you come back?" Dante turned to look at her. "Yes. Promise me." "Naomi, promise me you'll come back, because if something happens to you—" Her voice broke. "Lucia needs you. I need you." The words hung in the air between them. Dante reached out slowly and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. "I promise," he said. Then he leaned forward and kissed her forehead. It was the gentlest touch, barely there, but it sent electricity through her whole body. "Get some rest," he whispered. "Tomorrow, everything changes." The next night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She paced the room while Lucia slept peacefully in the big bed. Dante had left hours ago with Marco and a group of men. She didn't know where he'd gone, didn't know what he was doing. All she knew was that he was out there fighting her battles, risking his life for her and Lucia. Around midnight, she heard cars pulling up outside. She ran to the window and saw the SUVs returning. Men climbed out, some limping, some bloodied, but they were alive. And then she saw him, Dante, stepping out of the lead vehicle. He was covered in blood, his shirt torn, but he was standing. He was alive. Naomi didn't think. She just ran. She flew down the stairs and burst through the front door. Dante looked up in surprise as she launched herself at him. "You came back," she sobbed. "You came back." His arms came around her, holding her tight. "I promised." She pulled back to look at him. "Are you hurt?" "Just bruises. I'm okay." "And Terence?" Dante's eyes went dark. "He won't hurt you again. Ever." Naomi understood what that meant. Terence was dead. The man who'd terrorized her for years, who'd silenced her daughter, who'd made her life a nightmare. He was gone. She should have felt guilty. She should have felt something other than pure, overwhelming relief, but she didn't. "Good," she whispered. Dante stared at her in surprise. Then something shifted in his expression. The careful control he always maintained cracked. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry, filled with all the fear and longing they'd both been holding back. Naomi kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his ruined shirt. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I'm a bad man, Naomi," Dante said roughly. "I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more terrible things. You should run from me." "I know what you are," she said, "and I'm not running." "Why not?" "Because you saved us. Because you're good to Lucia. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel scared anymore." She touched his face. "Because I think I'm falling in love with you." Dante closed his eyes. "You shouldn't." Too late. He opened his eyes and looked at her with such raw vulnerability that her breath caught. "I lost everything once. If I let myself love you, if I let myself love her and something happens, then we'll face it together, all three of us. You'd really stay, even knowing what I am, as long as you want us." Dante pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair. "Forever," he whispered. "I want you forever." When Naomi woke the next morning, she found Dante already gone. But there was a note on the pillow beside her. "Gone to tie up loose ends. Back for lunch. I love you. D." She held the note to her chest, smiling like a fool. Then she heard Lucia's footsteps and quickly tucked the note away. They had breakfast with Rosa, who gave Naomi a knowing look, but didn't say anything. Then they went out to the garden to check on their sunflowers. Lucia was delighted to see tiny green shoots poking through the soil. She clapped her hands silently and did a little dance. "They're growing," Naomi said. "Just like you." Lucia looked up at her and smiled. Then she pointed to the house. "You want to go inside?" Lucia shook her head. She pointed more insistently, then made a gesture like she was drawing. "You want your sketchbook?" Lucia nodded. Naomi went to get it. When she came back, Lucia was kneeling by the sunflower shoots. She took the sketchbook and started drawing. Naomi watched over her shoulder. The picture took shape slowly. 3 people in a garden. A man, a woman, and a little girl. They were all smiling, and above their heads, Lucia drew a sun with rays reaching down to warm them. At the bottom of the page, in careful, shaky letters, Lucia wrote something, the first words she'd written in 2 years. "My family." Naomi's vision blurred with tears. She pulled her daughter into her arms and held her tight. "Yes, baby, our family." Behind them, Dante's car pulled up. He got out and walked toward them, and when Lucia saw him, she did something incredible. She stood up and ran to him, and as she ran, she opened her mouth and spoke. "Dante!" Her voice was small and rusty from disuse, but it was there. Real. Beautiful. Dante caught her as she jumped into his arms. He looked at Naomi, his eyes wide with shock. "She spoke," he said. "She spoke," Naomi repeated, laughing through her tears. Lucia pulled back and looked at Dante seriously. Then she said, very carefully, "I love you." Dante's face crumpled. He held her close and pressed his face against her hair. "I love you too, little one. So much." Naomi walked over and wrapped her arms around them both. They stood there in the garden, 3 broken people who'd found each other and somehow become whole. "We're going to be okay," Naomi whispered. Dante kissed her temple. "Yes, we are." 3 months later, the sunflowers had grown tall, their bright yellow faces turned toward the sun. Lucia sat on a blanket in the garden, drawing in her sketchbook, while Dante worked on weeding the vegetable patch they'd started last month. Naomi watched them from the patio, a cup of coffee warming her hands. She still couldn't quite believe this was her life, that she lived in this beautiful house, that Lucia spoke now, full sentences that tumbled out of her like a dam had broken, that she fell asleep every night in Dante's arms, safe and loved. It wasn't perfect. Dante still had his dark moments, times when the weight of his past threatened to crush him, and Naomi still had nightmares about Terence, about those men with guns. But they were healing, all three of them, together. "Mama," Lucia called, "come see what I drew." Naomi set down her coffee and walked over. Lucia held up her sketchbook proudly. She'd drawn their house with the garden in front. And standing in front of the house were 4 figures now: Dante, Naomi, Lucia, and a small baby. Naomi's breath caught. "Baby?" Lucia nodded seriously. "We need a baby. For our family." Dante looked at Naomi, one eyebrow raised. There was hope in his eyes, carefully hidden but there. Naomi smiled. "Maybe someday, sweet girl." "Soon," Lucia insisted. Then she went back to her drawing, adding flowers around the edges. Dante stood and walked over to Naomi. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her softly. "Someday?" he asked quietly. "Maybe." She looked up at him. "Would you want that?" "I never thought I'd get a second chance at a family, but now that I have one," he touched her face gently. "Yes, I want everything with you." Naomi kissed him again. Behind them, Lucia made a gagging sound. "Gross! Kissing!" They both laughed. Dante scooped Lucia up and spun her around, making her shriek with laughter. The sound was pure joy, unfiltered and bright. Later that evening, after Lucia was in bed, Dante and Naomi sat together in his study. He'd shown her his diary, the one he'd been writing since they met, pages filled with his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. It was his way of processing everything, just like Naomi's diary had been hers. "I have something for you," he said. He handed her a familiar, worn leather book, her diary, the one he'd found on the bus all those months ago. "I thought you might want it back," he said, "to remember where we started." Naomi took it, running her fingers over the soft cover. She opened it to a random page and read her own words from so long ago. "I don't know how to keep doing this. I'm so tired of being scared. I just want someone to see me, to understand, to help." "Someone did see you," Dante said softly, and everything changed. Naomi closed the diary and set it aside. Then she pulled out a new journal, one Dante had given her last week. She opened to the first page and started writing. "Today, Lucia asked for a baby brother or sister. Dante said, he wants everything with me. I think I finally understand what happiness feels like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of love. The knowledge that even in the darkest times, we found each other, and we'll never be alone again." She set down the pen and leaned against Dante's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her and kissed the top of her head. Outside, the stars came out one by one. The city glittered in the distance. And somewhere in the house, a little girl slept peacefully, dreaming of sunflowers and families and love that would never let her go. They'd all been broken once, shattered by violence and fear and loss. But broken things could be mended. Pieces could be put back together, stronger than before. And sometimes in the wreckage of what was lost, you found exactly what you needed. You found home, you found family, you found love that would last forever. The end.